Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer and explore the totally fascinating, microscopic world of kingdoms Protista and fungi. You know that one drawer in your kitchen? The one where you toss the random batteries, rubber bands, and keys that don't really have a specific place? Well, have you ever wondered how scientists categorize the millions of living things on Earth when they don't quite fit into neat little boxes? Today, we're actually going to look at biology's version of that junk drawer. We'll see what happens when organisms refuse to play by the rules, and we'll unpack the vital, invisible forces that are constantly breaking down the world around us. Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover 1. Biology's misfit kingdom. 2. The ocean's tiny titans. 3. Shapeshifters and survivors. 4. The animal ancestors. 5. The fantastic fungi. And finally, 6. How fungi multiply.
All right, starting off with Section 1, Biology's Misfit Kingdom. So, think about this for a second. Where do organisms go when they just don't quite fit the mold? If you aren't a plant and you aren't an animal, and you definitely aren't a typical bacterium, where do you belong? Like we talked about, every system needs a catch-all category, a junk drawer where all the odd, incredibly cool things end up. And in biology, that drawer has a specific name.
Take a look at this. This dense taxonomy chart right here perfectly maps out this whole phenomenon. We're going to unpack this classification together and turn it into a clear, really fun narrative about life at the microscopic level. Welcome to Kingdom Protista. Coined by a scientist named Haeckel, this kingdom includes all single-celled eukaryotes. Now, the absolute key takeaway here is that its boundaries are famously blurry. It is, literally, biology's misfit kingdom. They're mostly aquatic, hanging out in water, and they can reproduce both sexually and asexually. But because they're essentially just grouped together by what they aren't, the diversity you'll find here is just staggering.
Moving right along to Section 2, the ocean's tiny titans.
It is so fascinating to contrast two entirely different survival strategies within this microscopic world. On one side, we have the crucifites. These guys drift passively through water currents like tiny, indestructible glass ships encased in silica walls. On the other side, though, we have the dinoflagellates. These are the armored, active swimmers. They're equipped with stiff cellulosic plates, kind of like tiny suits of armor, and they move under their own power using two little whip-like tails called flagella. Let's zoom in on those passive floaters first, the crucifites, which includes things like diatoms and golden algae. Because their cell walls are made of silica, they're virtually indestructible. I mean, over billions of years, these tiny microscopic shells have literally piled up at the bottom of our oceans to form massive deposits known as diatomaceous earth. But here's the really important part. They are the chief producers in the oceans. They're the absolute base of the food web. Without them, the entire marine ecosystem would just collapse. But then, on the flip side, the active swimmers, the dinoflagellates, well, they have a much darker side. While they are mostly marine and use sunlight to make food, showing up in cool colors like yellow, green, brown, blue, or red, they can be totally deadly. When the red dinoflagellates, like gonialyx, multiply out of control, they cause what we call red tides. They release these potent toxins into the water that can wipe out huge numbers of fish and other marine animals. It's a pretty stark reminder of the immense power held by things we can't even see.
All right, Section 3, Shapeshifters and Survivors. Check out the euglenoids. The crucial point here is that euglenoids are the ultimate shapeshifters. You'll find them in fresh, stagnant water, and get this, they literally change their diet based on the weather. When the sun is out, they act just like plants, photosynthesizing to make their own food. But plunge them into darkness? They instantly switch gears and become predators, actively hunting down smaller organisms. Oh, and they don't even have a traditional rigid cell wall. Instead, they have this flexible, protein-rich layer called a pellicle. Think of it kind of like a stretchy, microscopic superhero suit that lets them bend and flex. Next up, we have the slime molds. Now, these are saprophytic, which is just a fancy botanical word meaning they are nature's tiny recyclers. They feed on dead and decaying stuff. They literally slide along rotting twigs and leaves, just engulfing their food like a blob. When conditions are great, they clump together into this enormous spreading mass called a plasmodium. But when times get tough, they transform. They build these little structures called fruiting bodies and release incredibly tough spores. These spores have true walls that act like tiny survival bunkers, keeping them safe for years until a gentle breeze carries them off to a better home.
Which brings us to Section 4, the animal ancestors.
Okay,
So all protozoans are heterotrophs, meaning they have to eat other living things to survive, just like us, and they're widely believed to be the ancient primitive relatives of animals. They break down into 4 distinct types. First, the amoeboid, which capture their food using false feet, called pseudopodia. Second, the flagellated, which zip around using long whip-like tails. This group actually includes infamous parasites that cause sleeping sickness. Third, the ciliated protozoans, like Paramecium. Imagine a cell covered in thousands of tiny little hairs acting like brooms, sweeping food right into its mouth or gullet. And finally, the sporophorozoans, which are defined by having a highly infectious spore stage. This includes the devastating parasite responsible for malaria. So yeah, this junk drawer kingdom actually has some profound impacts on human health.
Time for Section 5, the fantastic fungi.
When you think of fungi, I'm guessing you probably just picture mushrooms popping up in a damp forest. But fungi are actually the invisible architecture behind so much of our daily lives. Without them, we honestly wouldn't have some of our favorite foods. Single-celled fungi, what we usually just call yeast, are the absolute secret ingredient behind baking fluffy bread and brewing beer. We're talking about a massive kingdom of organisms that totally shapes our diet and our global ecosystems.
Fungi show just incredible diversity in how they look and where they live. Most of them are saprophytes, those heavy-duty decomposers of the natural world we talked about, constantly breaking down dead trees and leaves. But they can also be parasites, or, amazingly, symbionts. This means they can be great team players. When they partner up with algae, they form lichens, and when they team up with plant roots, they form mycorrhiza, basically acting like a root extension cord to help plants absorb more water and nutrients. Plus, they're super efficient at multiplying. They can reproduce vegetatively by just splitting or budding off, or asexually by releasing millions of specialized survival capsules known as spores.
And finally, Section 6, how fungi multiply. Let's look at how fungi handle sexual reproduction. It's actually a really strict, beautifully orchestrated 3-step recipe. First is plasmogamy. This is when the actual cellular contents, the protoplasms of 2 mating types, fuse together into one. But notice, the brains of the cells, the nuclei, haven't fused yet. Step 2 is karyogamy, where those 2 nuclei finally merge. And step 3 is meiosis, which happens in the resulting cell to create completely new, genetically diverse spores, ready to start the whole cycle over again.
But, hey, nature loves a good plot twist, right? In some fungi, step 1 and step 2 don't happen immediately back to back. Instead, there's this really fascinating pause called the dikaryotic stage. This creates what scientists call an N+N scenario. Basically, after the cells fuse in step 1, the 2 parent nuclei just hang out together. They share the same space without actually combining. It's kind of like 2 nuclei acting as temporary roommates in a single cell, before they eventually move on to step 2 and fully fuse.
It really is an alien world right beneath our feet and floating in our waters. Just think about everything we've uncovered today from a single dense classification page. If these microscopic shapeshifters, toxic red tide producers, and ultimate forest decomposers are dictating the health of our oceans and the food on our tables, what else is hiding in plain sight out there? The next time you see a mushroom on a log or hear about a red tide on the news, you'll know exactly what intricate biological machinery is at work. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.